Welcome, everybody, to the B Word. I'm Steve Lee, the lead of Square Crypto, and I'm here today to moderate a discussion about Bitcoin that will span from what makes it special to its relationship with energy, the community ethos, and the future of Bitcoin. I'm joined by three special guests. The first is Cathie Wood, founder, CEO, and CIO of ARK Invest. Next is Elon Musk, techno king of Tesla and chief engineer of SpaceX. And finally, Jack Dorsey, CEO of Square and CEO of Twitter. So we have a lot to talk about today. So let's get to the talk and get right to it. I'm going to start off by asking each of you a question, which is what's shaped and influenced your views on Bitcoin? And let's start with Cathie.
Okay, Steve, thank you. Well, the first thing was our focus on disruptive innovation. So starting in 2011, Brett Winton, our director of research, who I know will be on the program later, he started talking about this thing called Bitcoin at the time. And it was a curiosity as we were doing our brainstorms in research. But as we learned more about this open source ecosystem, that might fulfill the role of the payment system that the internet neglected to build into the system, not expecting commerce. We thought, this might be something. And then I became even more interested when I realized that my economics would come into play as well here. And Art Laffer, my mentor from USC, and a monetary scholar. In 2014, I asked him if he would collaborate on a paper on Bitcoin. And he was a bit of a naysayer at first, but agreed to read the paper. He read the paper, tore it up, and from an economics point of view, really wanted to understand this. And he said, I think you got something here. This is a rules-based monetary system. I've been waiting for this for my entire career. So the combination of disruptive innovation generally, economics on top of that, and the huge misunderstanding out there as to what this is, that was intriguing and launched our research effort.
Thank you. Elon, what's influenced your views on Bitcoin?
Well, I've thought about money for quite a while, obviously, since the PayPal days. And then the companies that preceded that, X.com, which I created, and Confinity, which Peter Thiel, Max Levchin, Luke Howry, and others created. When we combined the companies and made PayPal. So I've been thinking about money for a long time. And really, I think it's best to think of money as an information system, primarily an information system for labor allocation. For practical purposes, it exists in a series of heterogeneous databases, very different databases in bank mainframes around the world. It moves quite slowly in reality. It may seem to move fast sometimes, and it does with PayPal, which is real time. But the vast majority of the systems out there are batch processing. So the actual reconciliation may take 1 to 5 business days, sometimes longer. And you have the ACH system, which is ancient and still in operation, which allows transfers effectively like a check would be an ACH transfer, but it's not secure. And you've got the credit card systems, which are also not secure. It would be like handing your username and password to a stranger in a restaurant if you buy a meal. So there's definitely an opportunity for something that is better from an information theory standpoint. So and there you can think of it like data on a network. I think is the way to view it. What has the most throughput? What has the least error? What drops the fewest packets? Fraud, for example, being a source of error. And government interference in currencies being a source of error. But it's fundamentally an information system. So I think it makes sense to support something that improves the quality of information with which we conduct the economy. And Bitcoin is a candidate for that. It does, I think, some things Well, and it's obviously it's evolving, and there are additional things like Lightning being done on top of Bitcoin. But Bitcoin per se is mostly solving for scarcity, or rather solving for essentially having no throat to choke, decentralized. So there's no one who can be coerced in any way to empty their Bitcoin account. Well, I guess they could technically, but on an individual basis, but the system as a whole cannot. And it has an open ledger, which is also quite good. But transaction volume is low. Transaction cost is high, and usability for the average person is not yet very good. But it has a lot of potential. And I should say that, like, I'm not, and I apologize for taking a long time, but there certainly is a lot to say. In general, I'm a supporter of Bitcoin and the idea of cryptocurrency in general. But as I've said publicly, we do need to watch out for crypto taking, especially Bitcoin, using proof of work to maybe use energy that's maybe a bit too much and not necessarily good for the environment. So, but on balance, I support Bitcoin, and I'm not an investor. The only publicly traded stock I own is Tesla, and the only significant thing I own outside of Tesla is my SpaceX stock that could help create both companies. So, but apart from that, I do own Bitcoin, and Tesla owns Bitcoin, SpaceX owns Bitcoin, and then I do personally own a bit of Ethereum and Dogecoin, of course. So.
Okay, great. Thank you. And we'll get into some of those issues in more depth as well. Jack, how about you? What shaped your views of Bitcoin?
The network and the community. It's deeply principled. It's weird as hell. It's always evolving, and it just reminded me of the internet when I was a kid. And I encountered alt cypherpunks when I was fairly young, and this was a topic of discussion for years. I didn't touch it until 2008 when we started Square. Elon and teams at X and PayPal inspired a lot of what we were trying to do, trying to bring in more to a physical world. But we encountered this crazy predatory system that was slow, that was obtuse. And I think, one of the things that we tried to do, which X and PayPal also tried to do, is build an abstraction layer around this complication and around this predatory nature that the financial industry can tend to be, and make it work for people. But when I saw Bitcoin in 2009, you see a chance to replace the whole foundation. And everything that Elon was talking about in terms of ACH and the credit card networks were built with very different agendas in a very different time frame. And it's crazy that they still exist, and they have scaled, but they just are not relevant to today, and they're certainly not relevant to the future, especially when you consider the entire world and countries like Nigeria or Ghana or India, and its interconnection with countries like the United States and Canada and all over Europe. So what really drove my thinking and drives my passion around it is, like, if the internet gets a chance to get a native currency, what will that be? And to me, it's Bitcoin because of those principles, because of that creation story, because of its resilience, because of the number of tests it's been. But what inspires me the most is just the community driving it. It just reminds me of the early internet. It's the only reason that I have a career, because I learned so much from people like who are building Bitcoin today, and I continue to learn in that sense, and I'm so grateful for it.
So that's a good segue into the next question I'd like to ask you, Jack. Is you said before that Bitcoin changes everything. Can you speak more to that?
Well, I just think that a lot of what we experience in life, when you really get down to the foundation, a lot of our monetary policies, a lot of our monetary systems cause so much distraction and so much cost. And when you get to a system where you have the potential for people to truly own it, they can verify it themselves. You don't have to have trust going in. You don't have to trust it at all. You can verify it through source code or whatever your appetite is, and that any particular person can help drive the future of it. And at the same time, it's not controlled by any state. It's not controlled by any bank. It's not controlled by any corporation. And these three parties of people who participate in the network, people who mine, and also the developers, constantly debating the correct roadmap and the way forward, is a beautiful thing. And I don't know of many other consensus-based models that have existed at that scale for this long with this amount of success. And we're still fairly early. So when, I met a woman in Ethiopia 2 years ago, and she was trying to create the lift for Ethiopia. Elon, I think I reached out to you at that time as well because she really wanted some Teslas. She still has to take paper fiat cash from her passengers and pay all of her drivers in the same way because there's no monetary system that she can utilize. There's nothing digital. And Africa as a continent is hugely interconnected from a monetary standpoint, but also hugely taxed in that same way. So a lot of the potential that I see, the internet having a native currency helps her build her business in a much faster way. And also, if you consider something like Bitcoin existing before YouTube, before Twitter, before Facebook, a lot of the business models that we have today would not be the same. We would certainly not have the dependency we have upon the advertising business model if Bitcoin existed pre-Twitter. And I think the amount of business models that it enables, the amount of innovation it enables going forward, especially when you can consider the whole internet instead of going country by country by country by country, which you have to whenever you're doing with finance, it really just opens the aperture. And that is what I want to see in my lifetime is a currency that is standard and sound for the internet that everyone can use.
Great. A hallmark of Bitcoin is its fixed supply of 21 million coins. Elon referenced that earlier. It may be the first system that humans have created that humans cannot later change. Kathy, I'm curious, with your background in monetary history and macroeconomics, what are your thoughts on that type of system?
Oh, well, I'll recount the story about Art Laffer and our going through the paper. And he said, as I said, first rules-based monetary system, global, ever. This is a very big idea. Once we had convinced him of the ecosystem itself. Now, this is the role that it's playing, given that the rule is a quantity rule, that 21 million units, is really a store of value role. So there are three roles of money. Store of value, very important. The means of exchange, so for transactions, and the unit of account. Every good priced in terms of whatever the unit is. So store of value is its primary use right now. The others exist. Unit of account, reserve currency of the crypto asset ecosystem. That's being seeded a little bit towards stable coins right now. But the store of value is a very big role. And means of exchange with apps built on top of the Bitcoin blockchain, we think is going to become more of a reality. Right now, high value transactions take place over Bitcoin, and that is a very useful role. So we look at those, and I remember saying to Art, "How big could this be?" And he said, "Well, how big is the U.S. monetary base?" Well, today it's $8 trillion. $8 trillion. At the time we were talking, it was $4 trillion. So we've gone through another crisis since then. And so the store of value, this idea that purchasing power will go up over time if demand rises relative to supply ultimately fixed at 21 million units. That's a very good thing. Purchasing power going up globally around the world. And this idea that it's a hedge against confiscation of wealth. And that can take place in a myriad of ways. But inflation, and especially hyperinflation in emerging markets, is the primary way. Talk about destroying purchasing power. So that's a very big idea. And I'll also mention deflation. In some ways, it's a hedge against deflation. I know some people are confused that we at ARK think that we're in a deflationary environment here in the United States. If that is true, the odds of a hyperinflation in the rest of the world, especially in emerging markets, is also true. So, but this deflation, and we learned from 0809, there's counterparty risk associated with deflation. And I think Bitcoin would be a hedge against that eventuality as well. So it's a very big idea.
Right. I suspect among us, there's not a lot of debate about Bitcoin's potential as a store of value. But Jack, you referenced earlier it being or becoming the native currency of the internet. Can you speak more to that, and also how it relates to maybe how institutions think about it?
Yeah, I mean, like just simple example. If I happen to be in Ghana and my family is in Nigeria, currently I can take anywhere from and I need to send money back, anywhere from 10 to 30% off the top just to send that money back. Whereas if you just focus on the worldwide remittance problem, Bitcoin solves so many of those problems today instantly without having to go through any intermediaries or any slowness or complicated systems that a corporation or a state created. So I think having sound money that is separate from the state is the idea. Having it completely verifiable by everyone, including the state, including corporations, including individuals, including developers who want to build on top of it, is quite powerful, and that's what keeps it secure and strong. And I think that's we need more of that, which is why this one of the reasons why this conversation is so important is as entities come into the space, it's not just buying an asset and holding on to an asset and treating it as an investment. There's something special that created this, and something precious and something very unique, which has to be protected, and we need to do whatever we can to help that thrive as well.
Elon, I'm curious your opinion on this. You mentioned earlier about Bitcoin's throughput, or the importance of throughput, maybe some concerns around Bitcoin. Can you speak? Do you think Bitcoin can become peer-to-peer cash?
Well, Bitcoin does have a fundamental scarcity limit at the base layer that's designed in. That doesn't mean you can't have some layer 2 system in theory like Lightning. And I understand Lightning is doing well in some small countries. There's some question mark as to whether you need a money transmitter license. Just a debate as to whether that's needed, given that it is not open ledger. So that's a whole separate debate, of course. But Bitcoin by itself simply cannot scale to be the monetary system for the world at base layer. But with a second layer, this is possible depending upon how that second layer is implemented. Yeah, that's part of why I think there may be some merit to something that may seem silly, like Ethereum, like Dogecoin. I think Ethereum also, like I said, the three things I own outside of SpaceX and Tesla, and obviously it's a Neuralink and Boring Company, but of any significance are Bitcoin by far, and then some Ethereum and some Doge. So if the price of Bitcoin goes down, I lose money. I'm not sort of I might pump, but I don't dump. So it's not a case of I definitely do not believe in in getting the price high and selling or anything like that. And I would like to see Bitcoin succeed. I think there's some merit to this is not a slam on Bitcoin. There's some merit to considering something that has higher max transaction rates and a lower transaction cost, and kind of seeing how far you could take a single layer network where the exchanges act as a de facto second layer. I think you can probably take that further than people realize, and as bandwidth increases over time, latency decreases. SpaceX's Starlink is actually playing a role in this, and I think long term people will probably have access to worldwide access to gigabit level connectivity at low latency, and so at low cost. And so then your base layer could do a lot of transactions if you take that into account. So yeah, but like I said, Bitcoin with a layer 2 system certainly could scale to do a vast number of transactions. Same goes for Ethereum.
Question about the scaling at the layer 1. The concern from the past 5 years of debate in the Bitcoin community is that would sacrifice too much decentralization and hurt the censorship-resistant properties of Bitcoin. I'm curious if what are your thoughts on that? Are you sensitive to that? And are you concerned about losing some of the special properties of Bitcoin or another cryptocurrency by scaling at layer 1?
Yeah, I mean, these things it's helpful to use the physics tools of thinking and say, scale up, scale down, and see if it still makes sense. So if scaling up the transaction block doesn't make sense, why don't you scale it down? And have it be, so that somebody, with a laptop from 2008 can still run a Bitcoin node. Why not slow it down? Oh, you want to slow it down? Well, maybe you're at the wrong number then.
there's actually there's members in the community that do want to slow it down, but I understand your point.
It's silly. The reality is the average person is not going to run a Bitcoin node. So this is and Bitcoin. It was a lot of clever ideas, but these parameters were set. I don't know in 2008 or something, maybe 2009. And there's been some improvements since then, but not a lot. So, it's sort of if there was still in 2008 there was still a non-trivial number of people on modems. So, now it is quite common to get 100 megabit connection just for a house. Some houses have gigabit connections. So, and that trend is obviously in the direction of higher bandwidth and lower latency. And if somebody else doesn't do it, Starlink certainly will. So I have high confidence that you will be able to maintain a decentralized finance system while still having a much bigger blockchain, aka ASCII text ledger, a hash ledger. You can make the hash ledger bigger without suffering from decentralization as the average connectivity improves, obviously.
One idea would be to to put a Bitcoin full node in Starlink terminals. That way more people would be running it.
Actually, I have run this by the team at one point. I had this idea, which is kind of off the wall, but let's say you need a little space heater. And normally your space heater would just be pure entropy. Well, what if that space heater was also a Bitcoin, Ethereum, Doge mining node? Pick your currency. And so then you'd be heated up, and you would also mine your crypto and have connectivity in one.
I love that idea.
Yeah, I mean, better than running a space heater.
Absolutely. Are there any other so you're drawn to Dogecoin a little bit. Are there any other gaps in Bitcoin that you see that cause you to be drawn towards Dogecoin?
Oh, I think, I mean, I think there's a, Doge has the Doge community. I think is somewhat irreverent, obviously, and has great memes and loves dogs, and I love dogs and memes, and it doesn't take itself too seriously, and I think there's Occam's razor, which is the simplest answer is the most likely. It's a summary of Occam's razor. The simplest answer is the most likely one. Then there's a friend of mine came up with a variant on that the most ironic outcome is the most likely one. And then I have a variant on that, which is the most entertaining outcome is the most likely one. So if that is true, then the most ironic and entertaining outcome would be that the cryptocurrency that was started as a joke to make fun of cryptocurrencies ends up being the leading cryptocurrency. That would be the most ironic outcome.
Jack, what are your thoughts on that? Is Bitcoin resilient enough to overcome that?
I think it's resilient, but also I think like you find, I mean, that's what attracts me to Bitcoin in the first place is the irreverence. A lot of that just brings it forward, and at first go it makes it a little bit inaccessible, but as people get into it, it makes it more accessible and more spreadable. And I absolutely think the resilience is there. I think it's important to have fun as well. And anyway folks can express themselves. I think that goes back to the main idea of like how do we create a native currency for the internet? Anything that goes towards that path, like that's whatever wackiness or fun we can have along the way. That's going to make it a lot more enjoyable, and it's going to make a lot more people want to use it.
I'd also point out there's nothing stopping someone from creating a Bitcoin wallet that's like fun and has memes, has dogs. That's possible as well. Great. Let's move on
right now at this point.
Let's move on to the next topic, which is Bitcoin and energy. It's a really hot topic that lots of people are talking about. Let's start with Elon. You've been vocal on this. You've said that. I mean, you said many things about it. You've also said that Tesla will resume payments in Bitcoin payments if the renewable energy is approximately 50% and sort of looks like it's on a positive future trend. What do you think the state of things are with respect to that?
Yeah, so I do think that there appears to be a positive trend in the energy usage of Bitcoin. Actually, part of this is due to the drop in Bitcoin price. I mean, what I observed, or what I thought I was seeing, there may be some disagreements on this, but from when Tesla announced that it had acquired Bitcoin and was doing Bitcoin transactions, there was a massive run-up in the Bitcoin price, and also a massive increase in the amount of energy used to mine Bitcoin. And I think I understand renewable energy quite a bit. I mean, Tesla does solar and interacts with a lot of wind generation through our mega pack, because basically need to store energy from wind and from solar. So we're pretty plugged into the renewable energy industry. And there's just no way that you could basically double or triple the amount of energy in such a short period of time with renewables. You could shovel coal that fast. And so I was like, look, this is too sketchy. Tesla's mission is accelerating the advent of sustainable energy. We can't be the company that does that and also not do appropriate diligence on the energy usage of Bitcoin. So all I did was I said, look, we're going to suspend Bitcoin transactions for now. We're not selling any Bitcoin, nor am I selling anything personally, or nor is SpaceX selling any Bitcoin. Again, I want to emphasize SpaceX, Tesla, and I own Bitcoin. I also own a little bit of Ethereum and Doge, but the companies just own Bitcoin, and the Bitcoin that I own is worth much more than the Ethereum or Doge. So clearly, if I'm if these actions negatively affect me financially, if I was purely financially motivated, then I would not express this reticence about Bitcoin energy usage. Now, it looks like Bitcoin is shifting a lot more towards renewables, and a bunch of the heavy-duty coal plants that were being used, unequivocally being used, this is not a question mark, have been shut down, especially in China. So I think it's probably, we want to do a little bit more diligence to confirm could confirm that the percentage of renewable energy usage is most likely sort of at or above 50%, and that there is a trend towards increasing that number. And if so, then Tesla will resume accepting Bitcoin. So I think we want to just do a little bit more diligence, and I think, but most likely the answer is that Tesla would resume accepting Bitcoin, most likely.
That's
Steve,
great to hear. I would agree with that. Kathy?
Yeah, may I ask a question? Elon, I'm not quite sure if you saw the paper that Square and ARK did together on making Bitcoin mining a part of a utility, a broad-based utility ecosystem, whereby, the overage from sunshine or wind powers the Bitcoin mining machine, thereby enabling the proliferation of renewables to a much faster extent, or at a faster rate than otherwise would be the case. What do you think of that?
Well, the problem is that in order to operate so-called mining or hashing rigs, in order to operate a bunch of hashing rigs, effectively, you have to run them 24/7, which means you need base load. You can do that with solar and wind plus battery, but if you only did it based on solar or wind overage, your hashing rig utilization would be much less. So you'd be at a disadvantage.
Sure,
hydro or geothermal are great as renewable means. I'm also pro nuclear. I think modern nuclear power plants are safe, contrary to what people may think. I really think it's possible to make very, very extremely safe nuclear. I'm talking about fission. You don't need fusion. And then, of course, fusion. You just got that big fusion reactor in the sky called the sun. It comes up every day. But I think a combination of solar and wind plus stationary storage will get you that base load, so you can run hashing 24/7.
Jack, I'm curious. You've stated that Bitcoin incentivizes renewable energy. That's what we're talking about now. Do you have any additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, everything that Elon said and Kathy mentioned, but it's also incentivizing a lot of innovation in just energy space, and just like looking at unused energy. There's a company called Great American Mining that caps the methane flares on oil fields to power their rigs. And you just imagine, and you mentioned nuclear, Elon, as well, and just imagine all the unused energy that is just being wasted every single day. And being able to get that energy and converting it into a secure, sound money system for the planet feels like a worthy trade-off. And that's the sort of incentive that I think is most powerful, is like, how do we reuse what is being currently just dumped on the ground and wasted and not considered, and how do we do that at scale? And I think that's a bigger conversation that I think is missing. But I agree with everything that Elon has said, and also the paper we put forth.
I'm curious if any of you have thoughts on how what the industry can do to accelerate the transition to renewable energy. And like Elon specifically, could Tesla Energy or Starlink play a role?
Well, I think Tesla can play a role. Tesla's literal reason for existence. The reason I've put so much of my life energy into Tesla, which is a lot. In fact, I would say that I've had some pretty tough life experiences, and Tesla is responsible for probably 2/3 of all personal and professional pain combined. Just to give you a sense of perspective there. So this is a hella hard situation. But we do solar, commercial solar, solar retrofit, as well as the solar roof, and we make consumer battery packs called Powerwall for houses and small businesses, and then the utility scale, which are gigantic. We've done now a number of gigawatt hour installations. That's a lot. That's a lot. And a lot of them actually have been for load leveling the grid. Mostly they are, and combined with the first really big one we did, which is 100 megawatt installation in Australia. That's actually helped stabilize a huge portion of the South Australian grid, because it's able to react so fast. In fact, at first, because they've got a billing system in Australia that I think works at the sort of millisecond level, and we were operating at the microsecond level. So the system was operating so fast that the measuring system couldn't see it. But so Tesla's certainly doing a lot to enable renewables, especially wind and solar. And in fact, the limiting factor for us right now is cell production. So we need to both internally get the Tesla internal battery cells produced, as well as increase supply from suppliers. And generally, when I talk to our suppliers and they say, how many cells would you like us? How many cells can you make? Because sometimes they're concerned, well, is Tesla going to compete with them on cells? I'm like, no. If you want to make the cells, be our guest. It's just that we need a crazy number of batteries, and they need to be done. It obviously needs to be mined and produced and manufactured in an ethical and environmentally sound way. So, Tesla, we really do aspire to be the good guys, to be a company that people can believe in. That doesn't mean we don't make mistakes, but that's what we try. So, but I think generally hydro, especially existing hydro, is good for mining. Geothermal, there's lots of places in the world that have geothermal energy. Like I said, nuclear is also good. I think just I'm like as I said earlier, the expectation is not that the energy production must be pure as the driven snow, but it must it can't be using. It also cannot be using the world's dirtiest coal, which it was for a moment there. That's just difficult for Tesla to support in that situation. So I think, but I do think long-term renewable energy will actually be the cheapest form of energy. It just doesn't happen overnight. But as long as there is a conscious and determined and real effort by the mining community to move towards renewables, then obviously Tesla can support that.
That's great. Kathy, we've been talking a lot about energy, but many institutions are facing questions around Bitcoin's relationship with ESG. Can you maybe speak a little bit more to what is S and G in ESG and how Bitcoin might support those?
Sure. So E, of course, is environmental, S is social, and G is governance. And there is a massive movement afoot in the institutional world, especially, to embrace ESG and make sure that their asset managers are doing the same. So if we've just talked about environmental, and I really do believe that Bitcoin will be much more environmentally friendly, certainly than traditional gold mining or the traditional financial services sector. In many ways, it already is, and it's just going to get better that way. In terms of social, I know that many institutions, when they are thinking of social, they think of diversity and equity, pay equity, and all of that. But if from our point of view, the disruptive innovation point of view, social is much more than that. It is saving lives, of course, autonomous technology, that would be another topic for Elon. But in this case, allowing access to payment technology, as Jack is saying, everywhere around the world without friction. And just back to the remittance example, I think if I've got these stats correctly, there are certain countries in the world that are incredibly dependent on remittances for GDP. Tonga, 37%, El Salvador, which just deemed Bitcoin legal currencies, 24%, Nepal, 24%. And I think the remittance industry globally, roughly 700 billion. So saving people these egregious fees, think about it, you're paying anywhere from 8% to, as Jack said, 30% of your $100 that you're sending back to your family. That is social responsibility, I would submit, as is just the economic empowerment that Bitcoin will enable. We've talked about that already. And I know that Alex Gladstein is going to be talking later about, the 4.3 billion people in the world who are hostage to authoritarian regimes, or the 1.3 billion who are living in double-digit and triple-digit inflation, if not more. Saving them from the destruction of their purchasing power certainly is a noble social goal. So we expand social to be much more than the traditional ESG community. And then on governance, you've got the transparency of the ecosystem. It's completely transparent, unlike the opaqueness of financial systems and the toll takers in the traditional financial world. And I think a huge part of governance in the Bitcoin ecosystem are the Bitcoin core developers. Now, before I met them, and I've had the pleasure and the honor of meeting many of them, that was a part of this ecosystem I didn't understand. But actually getting to sit down and talk to them, if I have a learning curve need, it certainly is on the technology side. But in terms of talking to them about economics, economic theory, failed monetary regimes historically, they know economic history, many of them, better than anyone I've ever met. So that gives me a great degree of confidence that, they do believe they are on a noble mission. They could be paid a lot more than they're being paid right now if they worked at Google or Facebook or some of these other areas. But they've chosen, this sense of purpose for a noble goal.